Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them.
I try to do informational videos that will help younger players and younger dungeon masters enjoy the game better. Dungeon masters to run a better game and players to enjoy the game better. One of the new ones I'm doing, the new video types, is AD&D hacks, because you have those life hacks on those videos on YouTube, and I figured there's some hacks in Dungeons and Dragons you can use to make your character a little better, have a little bit more fun. When you make up a character for an AD&D Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, which is what I play, your weapon choices are dictated or limited by the character class that you choose. For example, magic users, wizards, are limited to dagger, dart, and staff. Thieves are limited to club, dagger, dart, sling, or sword, and they're limited in the kind of swords they can take. Clerics are limited to club, flail, hammer, mace, and staff. I play, and I've talked about this in other videos with the clerics, I play where a cleric can also use the weapon of the god that they worship. For example, a cleric of Thor can use a hammer. A cleric of Ares should be able to use a spear or a sword. A cleric of Grumsh would use a spear. You see what I'm saying? Druids are limited to club, dagger, dart, hammer, scimitar, sling, spear, staff, etc. Now, understand scimitars. There's a wide variety of weapons listed under that, including sabers, tulwars, that kind of thing. Fighter types get the widest array of choices for weapon proficiencies, but most of the fighter subclasses have specific weapons that they have to be proficient with by a certain level, or they have certain weapons that they prefer, and you have to go by that. These considerations skew your choices when you have a fighter type. For example, a barbarian has to have hand axe, knife, and spear, but he gets 6 slots. Hand axe, knife, and spear, he gets 3 others. So there's still a lot of choice there. And spears are damn good weapons. I don't care who you are. For the most part, players look at the damage columns when they choose weapon proficiencies, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's not. However, this tends to make every player character be proficient in the same weapons. And it can get kind of boring. You know, if you always take the same weapon, it can get kind of boring. There are many factors to consider when choosing the weapons for your character. For example, if your character has a really high dexterity but low strength, you might want to consider taking bow as a primary weapon, because you're good with a bow and not with a sword. Just saying. If damage is the only consideration, the entire party will be armed with two-handed swords, heavy lances, and polearms. The things that you need to consider are size. Is your character large enough to use the weapon? Your background. Is the weapon appropriate for the background of your character? For example, a society without mining cannot have metal weapons, or they have to trade for them. They're going to be very rare. A society without horses cannot have lances. You know, things like that. Because a lance is a weapon specifically used from horseback. If they don't have any horses, they can't use spears. They can't use lances. They can use spears, just not lances. Functionality. Spears are excellent melee weapons with reach and damage, and can also be missile weapons. They're dual function. Darts give excellent ranged attacks and can be thrown 3 per round. You get 3 shots with darts. And you can also put drugs on them very easily. Mages and thieves do that a lot. I rarely take a magic user without dart as a proficiency, because it's a good ranged weapon. You don't have to close to melee to use a dagger or whatever. Everybody takes a staff because that's what they envision a wizard to have, and that's cool. But they're also able to use darts, which gives them a nice missile weapon from a distance. And usually wizards have a fairly high dexterity, so they're good with darts. So bows fire twice as fast as crossbows, but crossbows can double as melee weapons. If you smack somebody with a bow, it's negligible at best. Painful at most, but that's about it. Crossbows, they're pretty heavy. They got a stock to them, like a rifle. You can beat somebody with that. It's got some heft to it, you know. Caltrops can be used to effectively discourage pursuit and to limit the directions of attack. If you know somebody's going to attack you, and there's one of two ways they can come, if you put a bunch of caltrops on one side, that's going to limit their ability. If you don't know what a caltrop is, it looks like a little star-shaped thing, like a jack you play with as a kid. But they come in bundles, and you throw them on the ground. And no matter how they land, there's always a sharp point sticking up. The idea is to keep people from approaching from that direction. Or if you're running away, you throw them behind you, and the bad guys step on them, and they can't chase you because their feet hurt. Okay, they don't do a lot of damage, but they do discourage pursuit. Let me tell you, and you can drug those too. If you're going underground with potentially narrow confines, polearms and spears may not be your best choice. How much encumbrance can your character handle? How heavy weapons may not be practical. If it's a seaborne adventure, this will preclude your character using this will prevent, your character from using heavier weapons or horses or certain types of equipment. Slings can also double, and if you decide to, slings can also double as garrots, choking cords kind of thing. A garrote, I think it's called. I've heard it pronounced garrote, whatever. Anyway, the point I'm making is you can use it to choke them. The point of this video is that sometimes there are more important considerations than just damage potential of a prospective weapon. Remember, your character is an individual. He or she has a background and specific tastes. Perhaps his training was exclusively as a desert horseback nomad, which would generally include some form of scimitar like a saber or a tulwar. Definitely a longsword at best. A two-handed sword he can't use because he's got to use the reins with one hand. But a longsword is meant to be used from horseback. That's why it's so long. A horseman's mace has a longer handle than a footman's mace. That's why it's a horseman's mace. Same thing with a hammer, a long hammer, that kind of thing. There's other flails, same thing, a horseman's or a footman's flail. Same basic concept. Perhaps his or her father was not wealthy and therefore could not afford a sword at all. His or her training would be centered around spears, staves, clubs, bows, slings, maybe your odd axe, that kind of thing. So it depends on the background of your character. A character, it doesn't matter what character you're making up for whose game or whatever game it is, a character with no flaws has no character. Also, a cookie cutter character, as generic as they come, is no fun to run. And the entire purpose of the game is to have fun. So whatever choices you make, try to vary it a little bit. Because if all you run is the same thing time after time after time, you're missing out on the whole other gamut of things. You know what I'm saying? I talk a lot with players of Dungeons & Dragons on Facebook. And the vast majority of these players play the later editions, 3.5, 5, 4th, that kind of thing. Very few people play 4th. A lot of them play 5th. And full disclosure, I have never played 4th or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The latest edition I have ever played is 3.5, and that's about my limit. My son runs a really, really great 3.5 edition game, but I don't enjoy running it. I don't mind playing it. I like playing it, especially with him. He's a great dungeon master. But I don't like running it because there are too many rules and the player characters are really, really powerful. In my opinion, this creates power players instead of role players. And what I mean by that is there's a lot more hack and slash and a lot less thinking. But again, this is my opinion. If you enjoy 3.5, go after it. Do your thing. You're better than I am. The argument that these other players constantly give against first edition Dungeons & Dragons is that it limits the players and is difficult to succeed at. And my response is, duh, yeah. When you roll up a godlike first level player character, why do you need to adventure? If you can do everything and you have all these abilities, I mean, it's not, to me it's not fun. It's not as fun. But beyond that, anyone who can read and reason and has half a brain cell can use the rules in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons to make their character very, very formidable, even at first level. let me elaborate on this. The argument that I get a lot is, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, magic users, they only get one spell per day, and after that, they're just crappy fighters. That's the argument I get. They only have 1 to 4 hit points, and then they only get one spell a day, and blah 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 blah. And that's just lazy nonsense. It really is. A cursory reading of the first level spells will reveal that at least 2 spells, Magic Missile and Shocking Grasp, have unclear durations listed. I believe they're listed as special. Essentially, they last until you use them. Magic Missile can be cast and held until needed. A first level wizard can cast Magic Missile multiple times and hold them so that when they encounter a battle, they have this missile capability ready right off the bat. And I'm going to elaborate on some of this a little bit later. Give me a minute. Shocking Grasp can be cast and held until needed as well. According to the book, the spell description, Player's Handbook, page 68, quote, a light touch from the opponent does not discharge the spell. What Shocking Grasp does, let me elaborate a bit. Magic Missile, you've got a spell, you cast it, and then you point your finger and the little missile shoots out, and it doesn't miss, and it does, I think, a d4 plus 1 damage or something like that. My point is, it's not big and bad, but for a first level, that it doesn't miss. That's pretty cool, and it does decent damage. So, and you get multiple spell capability as you go higher up in level. Well, if you precast Magic Missile, you see what I'm saying? Now, Shocking Grasp is pretty cool because you can reach out and grab somebody and it delivers electrical damage. Shocking Grasp. Well, it does a d8 damage plus 1 per level. So if you're a 3rd level wizard and you cast Shocking Grasp, it's a d8 plus 3. You see, it does pretty good damage. D8, that's equivalent damage of a sword. So, it's pretty good. Now, the problem is when you cast Shocking Grasp, you don't have to use it right away. You can hang on to it and use it when you want to. The fact that a light touch from the opponent does not discharge the spell means you get to choose when it goes. So you could shake hands and pat people on the back and whatever. It discharges when you want it to. That tells me that to discharge it, it has to be a conscious effort by the wizard. A simple handshake with a random NPC would not do it. Therefore, this spell essentially lasts until discharged. Also, note this is electrical damage. So, and according to the book, it actually says you need to hit somebody with it or hit something metal that is in contact with them. And I did a video a while back called Electrical Damage. Something about, I forget the name of it, but it was essentially, in my games, if you get hit with lightning, for example, you take the damage, and you can save for half damage. But if you're wearing metal armor, you take double the damage. Because you're encased in metal and you get hit with lightning. Okay? Now, transfer that same logic here. You don't have to hit them, you have to touch their metal armor. You see what I'm saying? And they take double damage because it's electrical damage. A lot of dungeon masters don't do that, but they have to allow you to touch the metal armor and they'll take normal damage even. So, either way, my contention is it's a very useful spell. I have seen people use, they've got the Shocking Grasp and they take a dagger and they'll stab somebody and then slap the back of the dagger so you get the dagger damage and the Shocking Grasp. Because the dagger is made out of metal, see. And there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't limit what you can do. It just tells you how the spell works. There's lots of loopholes. And now, a word of warning: if you're going to do these precasts, I would limit how many. Players will take advantage of this. Essentially, what a precast is during your group is traveling from point A to point B, and it's a 10-day trip by horse. Well, through the course of that day, you've got a first-level wizard. He can effectively cast 10 first-level spells until he gets to the next town. You see what I'm saying? Well, that's 10 precasts. 10 magic missiles, 10 shocking grasp, 5 of each, whatever. My point is, you have to limit what the players could do. Otherwise, they'll go hog wild with it. They will take advantage of those loopholes, and this guy will have magic missiles coming out of his ass for decades. Here's what I do. I limit the number of precast spells to 1 per hand. So he can have a Shocking Grasp and a Magic Missile. He can have 2 Magic Missiles. He can have 2 Shocking Grasps. Whatever. My contention is 1 precast per hand. That limits what they can do and again, that's what I do. You can do it another way. You can say, well, you can have 5 per hand. You can 3 per hand. Whatever you want to do is up to you. If you're the dungeon master, you can limit it how you want. But my contention is, you don't want to let them go too hog wild with it, or they will. Okay. This basically requires that the magic users think ahead. They can cast multiple precast spells on themselves, and this allows lower level mages to be a bit more effective. So you're not limited to just that 1 spell per day. Say if I'm a first level wizard and I have a magic missile and a shocking grasp, then I can use my actual spell that I get for the day for something a little more useful. Maybe a sleep spell, which, by the way, in my opinion, is one of the more effective spells. Yeah, it only puts them to sleep. But according to the rules, a prone sleeping person is a lot less... It's easy to kill them in their sleep. That's what I'm saying. Just walk over and slit throats with your dagger, if nothing else. A fumble misses, if I'm not mistaken. But my contention is... because it's different in each game. My contention is, at first level, you cast sleep. Anything you're going to be running into in that game is usually probably going to be affected by that sleep spell. And if it's not, you need to turn and run, because he's way out of your league. That's all I'm saying. But like I said, if a magic missile on one hand, a shocking grasp on the other, you can get a sleep spell, you can do an informational spell, some sort of a detection spell, that kind of thing. Makes you a little more useful as a wizard. Saying that you only have the 1 spell a day, and then you're a crappy fighter, that shows lazy. They're not willing to read the books. They're not willing to invest the time to make their character better. You see what I'm saying? Oh, he only has 1 to 4 hit points, so don't get hit. Find a way to avoid damage. Be a better player. And I'm sure there are other spells besides these 2 with similar loopholes that can be exploited as precastable spells. All you have to do is read. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons has a plethora of great points. It's not the primitive game people make it out to be. All players have to do is read and reason out the books. Reason out what's going on. Be sure to discuss this with your dungeon master ahead of time and get his approval. Also, keep in mind... all this precast stuff is nice, but the bad guys get to do it too. Doing an AD&D hack on something that I don't know how many people are aware of or not aware of, but it's something that magic users really need to be aware of. I'm calling this the polymorph self-help. I started playing D&D back, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, back in the 70s. I started running it in 1979. I still run it with my family. We played tonight. My son ran it. One of the main problems with magic users is that their susceptibility to damage and their inability to heal themselves. Think again. A lot of people think that wizards they die too easily because they only have a D4 hit points. Well, that does make them physically weak. But they're very, very powerful characters. And they do have the ability to heal themselves. Let me explain. There's a 4th level magic user spell called Polymorph Self. Wizards are able to get this when they turn 7th level. Read up on the spell very thoroughly. It's on page 78 of the Player's Handbook. 2 things you really need to pay attention to are the duration and the fact that whenever the wizard returns to his own form, because Polymorph Self changes your shape. Whenever the wizard returns to his own form, he is healed 1d12 points. A d12 hit points. At 2 turns per level, the minimum duration of the spell is 14 turns. that's 140 rounds, because each turn is comprised of 10 rounds. So at 2 turns per level, that's 14 turns, a minimum of 140 rounds. According to the spell description, the spellcaster can change form as often as desired, and the change only takes 5 segments. So that being said, a wizard can cast Polymorph Self, and then he or she can change form, presumably once per round, 140 times. Half of those times can be changing back to his or her true form. Each time the caster changes back into his or her true form, he is healed 1 to 12 points. This allows a magic user to heal himself from 70 to 840 points. That's a lot of healing. I don't care who you are, that is a lot of healing. A 20th level magic user would not have 800 hit points. Gods do not have 800 hit points in the game. Surtur, the fire giant, has 380. Thor has 399. Odin has 400. Atlas has 350. And Zeus has 400. So you see, 400 or 840 points maximum. If you say they averaged it out, say they rolled half that much, that's still 420 points. That's Odin can use that to heal up to full. You see what I'm saying? The healing effect of Polymorph Self should be sufficient for any magic user that you run. Okay? And I got a funny story to illustrate this. Years ago, I was running in my friend Art's game. My good friend Mike was running a magic user. Check out the video, the Savage Wizard. That's Mike, same guy. We had gotten high enough level to where Mike could cast Polymorph Self. A group of drow had attacked the party, and we'd fled. They were in pursuit. It was an underground setting, and it was a dungeon crawl, and Mike's wizard had almost died. He used Polymorph Self and began changing into a dragon and back over and over and over. Now, the drow were behind us, and further down the tunnel, there was a bunch of rocks, and beyond that was our party running from them. In the course of this game, the drow kept seeing a dragon, and then it would disappear behind the rocks, and then the dragon again, and then disappear behind the rocks, and then a dragon again, and then disappear behind the rocks. And it was just hilarious, because they stopped, and they were wondering what the hell was going on. So it actually in that essence served 2 functions, because not only did it heal Mike of all of his wounds, but it made the drow stop and allowed us to get away, because they didn't know what the hell was going on. It was again, Art runs a really great game. I wish I could play with him, but Mike ran one of the best magic users I've ever seen. He was very innovative. He used his spells to the best advantage, and he made himself useful. Again, if you're running a wizard and you think they're wimpy or they're no fun to run, be like Mike. Be a better player. Be like Mike. Instant Army. I did a video a while back on, I don't remember the name of it, but it was overthrowing the king or something. It was coups and rebellions, I think it was. And in that I talked about how a military force can be raised. Well, here's another way. I call it the Instant Army. I started playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back in the 70s, and I started running it in 1979. I still run it today with my family. One thing that plagues every player character group in virtually every game that has ever been played is that inevitably they will be outnumbered. The bad guys will have more bodies on the battlefield than the party. That happens a lot. While individually they may be inferior combatants, the added attack rolls increase the chances of critical strikes considerably. Essentially, as a dungeon master, if you give me 24 attack rolls, I'm going to roll some crits. I'm just saying. There's a spell out there that can help even the odds a bit. It's called Animate Dead. Animate Dead is a 3rd level clerical spell and a 5th level magic user spell
be sure and read up on it. The spells are on pages 46 and 79 of the Player's Handbook. Read through them very, very thoroughly because they are not identical. The one for the magic user is not the same as the one for the cleric. Just saying. Clerics get this spell when they turn fifth level. Magic users have to wait till their 9th level to get it. The spell allows the caster to animate one skeleton or zombie per level. So a 5th level cleric gets 5 per spell, while a 9th level magic user gets 9 per spell. Remember though, a 19th level cleric can animate 19 skeletons or zombies per spell, and the casting time for the clerical version is only 1 round. I think the magic user version is 10 rounds or something like that. Anyway, it's a lot longer. An 8th level cleric can create 24 skeletons or zombies for backup each day with all 3 3rd level animate dead spells. Cemeteries and battlefields become a gold mine for these casters. Zombies and skeletons are not the best combatants, but as I said, you get enough rolls and statistically you're going to roll some hits and crits. It's just, the numbers will be in your favor the more bodies you have. Years ago, I was playing in my friend Camilla's game. The situation was that we were 10th level player characters and our task was to oust the evil king of an ancient city. Camilla was an excellent game master. She had played in my game for about 2 years and she wanted to run one, and everybody jumped at the chance, especially me because I got to play, The group was having a hard time finding troops because the evil king was so feared. They decided to make a trip to find treasure and pay for mercenaries and to retrieve a holy relic to rally the temples to send their clerics and paladins to our cause. And I was okay with that. This was going to be a long trip, but I knew we needed the help. My cleric was essential to the success of the trip, so I had to go along. Luckily, the fighter in the group had a ring of teleportation. I asked to borrow it each night when we camped. He was suspicious, but I assured him that it would be returned to him each night, and it was. The trip took 2 months and a week to get the treasure and the artifact back. Each night I borrowed his ring and teleported back to the cemetery or inside the city, where I animated 30 corpses and instructed them to stay dormant until someone yelled a specific phrase. The specific phrase was, "Look, the heroes of the past are coming to help us." I animated 2,010 of these skeletons, many of which were buried with their weapons and armor. That was the custom back then, so, When it came time to attack, we had 20,000 mercenaries, 5,000 clerics, 8,000 paladins, and about 30,000 civilians who were just tired of being oppressed. Our force, which was a total of about 63,000 men, was formidable, but we were having trouble breaching the gates. The people inside the fortress have a significant advantage over the people outside the fortress. Ask anybody. Then the fighter teleported to the cemetery and yelled, "Look, the heroes of the past are coming to help us." 2,010 zombies and skeletons emerged from their graves and tombs and made their way to the gate, killing anyone in their path. They opened the gates for us. Many of the king's soldiers ran away or deserted, and the clerics and paladins were emboldened that their past heroes would help them in their cause. Given time, a huge force can be animated to your cause. They work cheap, free, and they require no food. You can even store them underground because they don't require air. So you can do as I did here, and inside the city, animate the corpses and leave them underground until you need them. You see what I'm saying? They make for pretty good shock troops. That's all I'm saying. So the next time you find your D&D group outnumbered, talk to your cleric. If he can animate some dead, it can surely even the odds.
Okay. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons a long time, since, over 40 years. I've been running it since 1979. I'm doing these videos to help younger players and dungeon masters because information is a good thing. In Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, there is a class called Wizards, and there's a subclass called Illusionists. These two classes cannot wear armor, according to the rules. If they do, they cannot cast spells. Consequently, Wizard and Illusionist armor class is usually not good. Usually it sucks. Especially starting out. Now, there are magic items that you can get through the course of the game that will help with this issue. Items such as rings and cloaks of protection, bracers of defense, that kind of thing. I'm just going to use cloaks and rings because they're a little easier, a little easier to illustrate. But these items all tend to be fairly expensive. For example, a +1 cloak of protection costs 10,000 gold book price. A +2 cloak costs 20,000. A +1 ring, any ring of protection costs at least 10,000 gold, depending on how your game master runs it. So that's a lot of money. When you start out, it's usually a couple of hundred gold is what you've got for all your equipment and everything, and it tends to go quick. So a starting out character, you're not going to afford one of these. It's not happening. The other thing about this is these cloaks and rings of protection also help your savings throws. They give you bonuses for savings throws. According to the rule book, wizards and illusionists cannot have armor at all. So these particular magic items are highly sought out because wizards who have a crappy armor class get killed easy. They don't have a lot of hit points. According to the advanced, I'm going to give you the hack to get around this, or at least a hack. According to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide, very cold weather clothing and cold weather clothing are made of thick furs, bear furs primarily, other cold weather animals. And these thick furs impart an AC bonus of +1 for cold or +2 for very cold. What they actually say is your armor class normally starts at 10, and then you subtract your dexterity adjustment. Well, they start at 9 or 8, depending on what kind you get. And then you subtract your dexterity adjustment from that. These thick furs are essential in cold weather climates, and that's why it's in the Wilderness Survival Guide. They didn't have rayon or any of these nice warm, what do you call them? I don't know. They don't have modern materials to make winter clothing out of, so you got to heap the furs on. Well, page 18 to 20 in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide specifically says that cold weather clothing gives a bonus of +1 and very cold gives a bonus of +2, which is the same armor class bonus as the cloaks of protection I talked. Now there are more powerful cloaks of protection, but they cost more. There are more powerful rings of protection, but they cost more. The very cold weather clothing, according to the Wilderness Survival Guide, costs 7 gold. Even if your dungeon master haggles, it's going to be a hell of a lot less than that 10,000. Very cold weather clothing, the big heavy bear furs and like that, costs 15 gold, which is still a lot. Even if he haggles, it's still a lot cheaper than the 20,000 for the +2 cloak of protection. Plus, it's worn and can be worn by any class. It keeps you warm, and it can be worn by any class. So fighters can do this. Anybody can do this. They're not magical items. They're just thick furs. They act as armor. These do not bolster your savings throws, but they can be worn with magical armor. Cloaks of protection cannot. There is a paragraph. I got to talk about this. There's a paragraph. As a matter of fact, it's the last paragraph on page 20, to be precise, of the Wilderness Survival Guide, which suggests that a dungeon master may want to give a 10% chance for a wizard to miscast a a spell. In other words, spell failure or ruin the spell, lose the spell, while wearing these bulky garments. This is entirely up to the dungeon master. But worst case scenario, you still have a 90% chance for spell success. You see what I'm saying? You could always, if you're wearing the heavy bear fur over you, not actually make it clothing, but make it a heavy cloak, you can drop it when you go into combat. That way you can cast at normal amounts. And temperature permitting, of course, because if it's minus 40 and you're trying to fight a battle, that's stupid to begin with. If a creature is attacking you and it's minus 40, chances are he's immune to the cold. You don't need to be fighting him. You need to be running away. That's all I'm saying. Regardless, 15 gold is a real bargain for a +2 cloak of protection, and it's something to consider. If you really feel that your player character's armor class is not what it should be, consider investing in a bear fur. It could literally save your player character's life. I'm doing a D&D Advanced Dungeons and Dragons AD&D story. It's actually a hack. It's called a flashlight. I got a lot of good friends in D&D, and I've learned a lot from them. Even when I'm the dungeon master, I learn from my players. In Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, much of the game is spent underground with your player characters, exploring catacombs, long-forgotten temples, dragons' lairs, other underground civilizations, that kind of thing. Many races in the game have what is called infravision, which allows them to more or less see in the dark. If you are running a human, the underground is very, very dark. Consequently, many players spend a lot of coinage on light sources, like torches, lanterns, oil, that kind of thing. Many spellcasters have the ability to alleviate this cost with their spells. There is a spell called Light. It's a first level magic user spell. I'm not sure who else has it. But there's a more advanced version of that called Continual Light. That's the one I'm talking about today. It's a second level magic user spell for clerics and illusionists. It's a third level spell. Years ago, one of my players contracted with a mining company to supply light for their human miners to work. A lot of people employ dwarves or gnomes or whatever because they have infravision and they work well underground. And that is smart. I'm not disputing that. But if you're a human colony, you have human miners, and human miners can't see in the dark, so they need light. Consequently, lots of money spent on oil and torches and lanterns and like that. One of my players decided he was going to make a little money. He bought 100 lanterns, and the book price for a lantern is 7 gold. I charged him 10 gold pieces each. He began casting continual light on the wicks. These lanterns used no oil, and they worked forever. It was just like daylight all around them in a pretty big area of effect. He sold these to the mines at 200 gold pieces each, and the mines were glad to get them because they now didn't have to spend money on oil for the lanterns. Every lantern requires X amount of oil. He made a huge profit. Paid 10 per, selling them for 200 per. Yeah, 190 gold per. Yeah. He would have made even more money using torches instead of lanterns because a torch book price is 1 copper piece. Many players do this. They'll take a torch and they'll cast, continual light on it, and you've got a torch that puts out great light and lasts forever. A lot of players do that. That's not new. That's nothing new. However, my friend Gerald, really, really good friend of mine, check out my video on druids. He's the guy who turned into the polar bear and walked away. He had a great idea. In the game, they have what are called scroll cases. In the game, they have a lot of scrolls, maps, that kind of thing. It's kind of a byproduct of the game. So, they have what are called scroll cases. Bone scroll cases, essentially, they have made of different things. The bone scroll case is essentially a shin bone of some kind of an animal. And it's hollowed out so that a map or a scroll can fit inside. And there, you put a cork stopper in it. It's great. You can seal it with wax or whatever, if you really, really want to make it watertight. But anyway, these bone scroll cases cost 5 gold pieces as per the book, and they're easy to get. They're pretty handy. If you buy a bone scroll case, you can down deep inside the thing, way down on the bottom, you can cast continual light. Or have a cleric or somebody cast continual light into the very bottom of the thing. The light shines out the end just like a flashlight. And basically, if you want to turn it off, you take the cork and stick it in the end. So you have a light source forever that you can turn off and, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. And it works just like a flashlight. I've had players do that and then tie the flashlight to their helmet so that if they ever need it, they're walking along and they pull the cork out. And now they've got a light wherever they look. It's nice. And what's nice about it is there's no heat source, so it doesn't ruin infravision. Yeah, it's pretty nifty. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons has tons of these little hacks that you can do, and I'm not going to talk about a few of them, but you can do some more on your own. All you got to do is read the spells, a little bit of logic and reasoning. Read the spells, know what they do, and you can have all kinds of different spells, all kinds of different loopholes, hacks, as you want to put it. But yeah, I hope this helps, and I hope this makes the game a little bit more enjoyable. There's all kinds of different things you can do in the game, and the main objective there, remember, have some fun. And I try to give people ideas on how to circumvent certain obstacles in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing a long time, over 40 years. I started running Dungeons and Dragons in 1979. I've seen a lot of workarounds. So here we go. At some point, your player characters, and this is advice for dungeon masters as well, at some point your player characters will run into big bad guys. Many of these big bad guys, usually demons, devils, that kind of thing, have what is called magic resistance. Magic resistance is a rating aside from the normal savings throw. The normal savings throw process, which completely it's a rating aside from the normal savings throw process, which completely protects the creature from any and all magical spell attacks. Magic resistance is rolled before savings throws, so it basically doubly protects the target. It's like a shield against spells. An example, meaning a fireball centered a foot in front of the target who has 80% magic resistance explodes. So this guy's got 80% magic resistance. The fireball explodes a foot in front of him. If the target makes that 80% percentile roll, it is completely protected from the fireball. If it fails that roll, the target still gets to try a savings throw to only take half damage. So it's an extra layer of protection that really stymies a lot of players. As you can see, magic resistance can be very, very frustrating for players who are facing these big bad creatures. They must rely on melee and missile attacks and other non-spell attack forms. Most big bad creatures like this have tons of hit points and can deal massive, massive damage. So it makes for a harrowing endeavor, to say the least. Enter the Druids with their Call Lightning spell. Call Lightning is a 3rd level spell. It allows Druids to call normal lightning bolts down from a stormy sky. These are normal, non-magical lightning bolts that the Druids call and direct. The magic doesn't create the lightning, it just calls and directs the lightning. Call lightning. In the spell description, it clearly states the Druid is then able to call down bolts of lightning from the sky to the ground from a storm. So these are natural lightning bolts. As normal lightning bolts, these lightning bolts bypass magic resistance, and the target must rely on its savings throws just like everyone else. Also, the Druids get multiple attacks with each spell. I want to say it's one for every 3 levels, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. I haven't read the spell in a while, so bear with me. But note the casting time and the rate of the lightning bolts. You only get to cast one. It's one, but you get to cast 1 bolt per turn. But you get so many bolts depending on your level. But you can only get one of these spells. You can only call down 1 lightning bolt per turn. The casting time is 1 turn. So, these bolts And a turn, by the way, is 10 rounds. So if you're going to go into combat with something big and bad, be sure and cast it ahead of time. These bolts do good damage, 2d8 plus 1d8 per level, so they start out, if you can cast one of these, your minimum lightning bolt's going to do 3d8 damage. And it provides a non-magical assault capability for your player characters. I recommend you let them figure this out on their own, because I had to. It was a hell of a thing too. But again, when you run Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, magic resistance can really screw with your group. Especially a high magic resistance almost eliminates magic users and clerics from the group. So, this makes a huge impact in your game. So, I do a lot of D&D stories, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because I think it's the best edition. I started playing Chainmail back in '76, and then I graduated to the basic red box Dungeons and Dragons, and then I went on to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and that's my favorite one. And I started running Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in 1979. I've been playing ever since. I still run it with my family. I'm online a lot, and I talk to people. I try to give good advice, and I keep hearing from other players how First Edition, AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, First Edition, is a primitive game that limits the player characters and requires no intelligence to play. And that is total hogwash. Later editions make player characters so powerful that it's hard for them to get killed. Players become complacent, they lack caution, they stop thinking. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons player characters can die accidentally. First level. And what I do is whenever I having people roll up characters for my game, if there's first level you start out at maximum hit points, and that way a wizard has 4, a thief has 6, a cleric has 8, and plus whatever bonuses they have. But that way they at least have a fighting chance. I do that for the players, and I do it for everybody, even the bad guys, so it's fair all the way around. So whatever rule you make as a dungeon master, you have to apply it fairly all the way around. But that's what I do. These Advanced Dungeons and Dragons player characters can die accidentally. Players are required in that game. They're required to play better, to play smarter, and to think before they act. I have heard people who have done critiques of 5th edition and to some degree 3.5 as well. I have not heard anything good about 4th edition. I've never played it, so I can't say nothing about it. But it's my understanding that the later editions make it very difficult to kill off the players. I mean, you can't die accidentally, essentially. But this video is not about critiquing the other editions. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm doing here is I'm going to try to start a new type of a D&D story, kind of like a D&D hacks. And what this is you get those videos on YouTube, and they... life hacks. You do this, it makes sense. Most of them are little rinky-dink things. Some of them are kind of stupid, but some of them are okay. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to talk about some loopholes in Dungeons and Dragons. Loopholes are a huge part of D&D, regardless of the edition. And no matter what type of fiction you're writing, if the game or a story, whatever, there's always going to be plot holes, loopholes, whatever you want to call them. They're always there. And I wanted to talk about a specific loophole that I discovered with a spell called water breathing. Water breathing, I think, is my character at that time had an item, and this happened decades ago, by the way. I discovered a loophole out of sheer desperation. Several decades ago, we were fighting a powerful, evil fighter, and he was killing us. He was kicking the shit out of us. We had a group of 6 to. We were pretty high level characters, but this guy was he was badass. 3 of us were already down, and my character basically was running and hiding. I had an item. I had one item. I had a ring of invisibility, which allowed me to hide from him. That was why I was still alive. I'm not arguing with that a bit. My dude was going to die if I tried to fight him, so I hid. I had another item. It was an amulet, and this item allowed me to cast water breathing, just like the spell, once a day. And what water breathing does, it allows you to breathe underwater, so you can go deep in the ocean or into a lake and find whatever's hidden there, whatever. Basically, I snuck up on him from behind with my ring of invisibility, and I hit him with water breathing. I used it offensively. There's no savings throw for that spell, and there was no way for him to enter any kind of body of water. There was not a pool or anything nearby. We're out in the desert. And the guy suffocated. That's how we were able to survive as a group, because I used water breathing on him and he suffocated. We were in desert ruins, and the mission was we were supposed to find a treasure there, and he wanted to kill us and keep the treasure for himself. And yeah, that wasn't happening. And remember, anytime you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and all it takes a cursory reading of the spells, and you can all find all kinds of loopholes. It's not what you have; it's how you use it. Every opponent can be beaten. It's just preparation. It's an idea. You got to think your way through it. Okay, every opponent can be beaten, and teamwork is a good thing. But every opponent can be beaten. It's not what you have; it's how you use it. That amulet I had was designed to allow me to go underwater. I used it offensively and killed the guy. It was self-defense. He was trying to kill us, but it worked. It was desperation. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons is a much easier version of the game as opposed to the 3.5 and the 5th edition and all that. And all that means is you get to role play instead of power play. It also means that there are tons of loopholes for you to capitalize on. Intelligent players will find the flavor of this game very enjoyable. The idea of Dungeons and Dragons is you're playing in a medieval world. That's a very simple time. Not a lot of complex electronics or anything to deal with. There are spells, magic spells, and things like that. But like I said, intelligent players will be able to find loopholes around all that. And the flavor of advanced Dungeons and Dragons is, in my opinion, far better than the later ones. So, anyway, I hope this video helps people who are trying to decide what to do and helps them enjoy the game more.
I'm doing an AD&D hack video. I was going through the spell book, the player's handbook, and the Unearthed Arcana the other day, and I came across a spell that I had almost forgotten about. This is a really great spell. It's called Material. Now, this spell is so damned useful, especially if you're up above your opponent. Okay, imagine the setting. You and your fellow players are running from a horde of orcs. I don't know, maybe they're being led by evil fighters commanded by a vicious leader, and your 5th level magic user lets the group continue along the corridor while he begins casting. When the bad guys arrive, they find a dead end. Your magic user casts Material and filled in the corridor with stone. Material is on page 55 of the Unearthed Arcana, and you really need to read that spell. The Material spell is a 3rd level magic user spell, which means that a magic user gets it at 5th level. The area of effect is 1 cubic foot per level of the caster, which means that the minimum area of effect is up to 5 cubic feet. Imagine a block of granite 5 foot high, 5 foot wide, and 5 foot deep. And you can increase the size by decreasing the depth. So, there's no limit on the shape. But imagine that big block of granite, what you can do with that. Granite weighs about 175 pounds per cubic foot. This 875 pound block of granite is just so damned useful. A group of enemies below you make nice targets. And granite isn't the only thing you can make with this spell. 5 cubic feet of water will help fight fires and fill pits in the desert. Gives you drinking water. The same volume of air will fill enclosed spaces and prevent suffocation. The uses are many, and varied. I've seen multiple examples in my AD&D gaming career of high-level magic users squishing enemies with conjured blocks of granite In my circles, we've dubbed it the Wile E. Coyote defense. Because in the old cartoons, the Roadrunner kept, the coyote kept getting stuff dropped on him. In 1994, I was running a game with five 5th and 6th level characters. I had 5 players. They were all 5th and 6th level. At one point, a dozen gnolls were chasing them, and they sought refuge in an old tower. The 6th level magic user waited for them to congregate below, trying to figure out how best to assault the tower. As they were standing there, a block of granite weighing over 1,000 pounds slammed down on top of them, just like in the cartoons. Remember, always, always, always read your spells. Many of them have uses far beyond their intended design. This is just one use of this spell. You can use it to create virtually any non-living, non-processed, non-manufactured, or refined items, which still leaves a hell of a lot of stuff for you to use. And creating a cubic foot of it per level is a lot of material to work with. I'm just saying. 5 cubic feet of granite will block a hallway. It makes an excellent projectile to drop on somebody, and it has a range of about, I want to say it's 10 feet. So you're standing in the window, you're looking down, they're standing there, you create it right there, and it just drops, because gravity is gravity. If you get the opportunity, check out this spell, and again, read all the spells, but specifically spells like this, because spells like this make the game fun, especially in the creative ways you can use them. And because there's, I hate to say loopholes, but because there's so little, guidance on how to do it, it leaves a lot of loopholes. So, I'm just saying.
Anyone who plays Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, any kind of a Dungeons & Dragons, any edition of Dungeons & Dragons, will eventually come into conflict with spellcasters. These include magic users, illusionists, clerics, and druids. Some monsters cast spells, demons, devils, that kind of thing. But primarily, it's going to be one of those 4. Magic user, illusionist, cleric, or druid, and may include others, but sometimes there's combinations, like a fighter mage or a thief cleric, that kind of thing. Thing about spellcasters is that they are rarely alone. Most mages and illusionists generally have henchmen regardless of how many people are in the opposing force. The primary tactic should always be to neutralize the spellcasters first. This is common sense when facing any force that includes spellcasters. Fighters and thieves can sure wreak havoc. Clerics, just as are spellcasters, but fighters and thieves can wreak havoc, like nobody's business. But high-level casters are much, much worse. They're like howitzers on a battlefield. Artillery, heavy artillery. They can wipe out entire parties wholesale. They're nasty. If you play a wizard correctly against your player characters, they're in for a tough fight, regardless of how many hit points the caster has. Here are some tactics that I have found useful when dealing with high-level spellcasters. First off, you have to target spellcasters with multiple projectile weapons. Arrows are good, but spears are better. Over multiple rounds. You got to do it over multiple rounds. There's a reason. Many high-level magic users use stone skin spells, so the first round of fire may be negated. You also have to watch out for the volley spell, which, just read the spell. Once a spear or multiple arrows are lodged in inside a wizard's chest or whatever, in his stomach, whatever, the magic user will find it very hard to cast spells. If the dungeon master is playing the wizard correctly, he'll have to get that fixed before he is able to cast effectively. If the wizard just keeps casting he's got 18 arrows in him and a spear hanging out of his chest and he's still casting, that's something to question. This guy has there's more to it than just a wizard. That's all I'm saying. Another good way to deal with a spellcaster is silence, 15-foot radius. but you have to center it on an item that they're wearing, not on them. There's a difference. This will eliminate a good part of their firepower. If you cast Silence on the wizard, he gets a savings throw. If you cast Silence on, say, his cape, all he knows is he can't utter verbal components. So that's going to eliminate a lot of his stuff, and he's got to find out how to get rid of that before he can continue. Silence 15-foot radius is a hell of a way to eliminate a lot of a spellcaster's spell capabilities. If you can get close enough to touch them, a water breathing spell will give them something else to worry about as they struggle to breathe. Water breathing allows them to breathe underwater, but if there's no water, they can't breathe. It's hard to cast spells when you can't breathe. And guess what? Water breathing has no savings throw. So you reach up, you touch him, he can't breathe, and then you take turns hacking on him because he can't cast. Okay. My son came up with this one, and this was a really nice one. He had an item that he could use to travel between dimensions, between planes. And long story short, he was able to grab this guy. Just all he had to do was grab him and teleport to this extra dimensional plane, and then let go of him and teleport back the next round. He had to survive one round of combat with this guy, and the guy couldn't get back. So teleporting them someplace else is a very nice way of dealing with them as well, providing they fail their savings throw. That's the thing. Teleporting them someplace deadly is even better. Like, in my son's case, it was the elemental plane of fire. My contention is teleportation can be a very useful weapon when dealing with spellcasters. Any spell you can cast to impede a caster will help. Like blindness, whole person, curses, entangle, darkness. Darkness is good because if he can't see who to cast on. And anything like that works. But non-casters can also be effective with darts tipped with drugs, knockout or poison kind of thing. And hang on. Sorry, lost my place. Smoke, dust, ropes, and lassos. Anything you can think of to impede a spellcaster's casting ability will neutralize them. And most spellcasters require concentration to cast. That's a foregone conclusion. Any attacks, melee or missile, should be timed while the caster is in the middle of casting his spell. Now, this is very effective if you use the initiative. Watch my video on initiatives. You'll see what I'm talking about. While he's casting, if you smack him with your sword, there's a good chance he's going to lose a spell. Disrupting a spell not only robs the caster of this spell, but it also tends to frustrate and anger him. And angry people make mistakes. I once saw a player. Now this is an actual story. This actually happened. A player who was up on the hill. He's using a bow very effectively. The wizard on the opposing side teleported away, and he said, "Oh crap!" So he's looking for another target. On his next shot, he fumbled and his bowstring broke. So basically, after he figured this out, he went to hide, and as he turned around, he noticed that the bad guy wizard was like right there, going to hit him with a big bad spell. So the next round, in order to stop this enemy wizard from killing him, he started using this bow and just slapping the shit out of him. Just pap, 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 pap. This turned out to be quite effective because it did no damage, but it was very, very painful. If you've ever been slapped with a stick, a switch, for example, when you were a kid, or in this case, a thick piece of wood smacking them, that's no damage, but very, very painful. And it distracted the wizard, excuse me, long enough so that other people could get up there and help him. And he pulled it out of his ass, but you know what? It saved his life. And you have to do things like that in the game. You have to be able to think on your feet. This guy was able to distract the wizard long enough to where the wizard couldn't cast any spells. And then once the rest of the group got up there, they were able to hack this guy dead. But my contention is, pain is a really great diversion. any way you can distract that guy from using a spell to kill you is a good way. I'm just saying.